Welcome back to another episode of Smooth Brain EDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. It's a new week, we got new gameplay, let's just get right into it. Our first player today is Shelby on Ephara, God of the Polis. This is a blue-white blink deck, hoping to consistently exile creatures and bring them back to the battlefield so that he can gain card advantage through his commander's ability and control the board. He keeps a hand with 2 planes, Field of Ruin, Star Compass, Crystal Shard, Archaeomancer, and Sublime Epiphany. Next is Logan on Minsc, Beloved Ranger. This Naya deck hopes to use its commander's ability to make his small but powerful creatures into giants to beat down his opponents. He keeps Stomping Ground, Rootbound Crag, Arid Mesa, Esper Sentinel, Giver of Runes, Ethersworn Canonist, and Wrath of God. Third is Ethan on the partner pairing of Toggo, Goblin Weaponsmith, and Sakashima, 1,000 Faces. Toggo's one-stop rock shop is open for business again, hoping to play lands, trigger Toggo's rock-generating ability, and create a ton of artifacts. His starting hand has a Misty Rainforest, Scalding Tarn, Mountain, Word of Invention, Mox Opal, Lightning Greaves, and Galzeth Prismari. Last up is Sam on Galea, Kindler of Hope. This is a Bant enchantment equipment deck, hoping to throw as many swords, cloaks, hammers, and pants as possible on his commander so he can swing in and cut down opponents' life totals. He keeps a hand of Glacial Floodplain, Hall of Heliod's Generosity, Soothsaying, Fertile Ground, Smothering Tithe, Serum Visions, and Reclamation Sage. We're about to hop right into it, but before that, go ahead and leave us a comment on who you hope will take home the victory. While you're down there, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe. We really appreciate all the support. Now, onto the gameplay.
It looks like Sam will win the die roll, and he'll start off with a Glacial Floodplain and pass. Shelby will play a basic plains and then pass the turn to Logan. Logan will play an Arid Mesa and immediately crack it. He'll find a Temple Garden to the battlefield untapped and play an Esper Sentinel, then pass to Ethan. Ethan will play a Misty Rainforest as his land drop for turn, and then pass back to Sam. Sam will play a Hall of Heliod's Generosity, tap for 1 to cast Serum Visions, and will pay for Esper Sentinel. He'll draw a card, scry 2 to the top, and then pass the turn to Shelby. Shelby plays another plains, then taps for 2 to cast a Star Compass, and Logan will draw a card off Esper Sentinel. The turn will then be passed to Logan. Logan will play a Balagid Sanctuary as land for turn, and then cast a Giver of Runes. The turn is then passed to Ethan, who fetches for a tapped Steam Vent on end step. Now in his turn, he'll play a Great Furnace, tap for 2, casting a Lightning Greaves, drawing Logan a card. He'll then cast a Mox Opal, then tap it to cast a Realm Right, and he'll name Mountain when it enters the battlefield. And he equips it with the Greaves. The turn is then passed to Sam, who shocks in a Breeding Pool as land for turn. He'll then cast a Fertile Ground onto his Floodplain, and Logan will draw a card. Sam then taps it for a white and a blue to cast Sigarda's Aid and Soothsaying. Not bad. He'll pass the turn to Shelby after that. And Shelby will play a Prairie Stream, tap for 4, and cast his commander, Ephara. The turn is then passed to Logan. And Logan will start off with a Rootbound Crag as land for turn. He then taps out to cast a Krenko, Tin Street Kingpin. After this, he'll move to combat and swing for 1 at Shelby with Esper Sentinel. The turn will then be shipped to Ethan, and Ethan will start off by casting Toggo, and he immediately moves the Greaves over to him. Ethan will then play a Scalding Tarn as land for turn, making a rock token, and then he just passes the turn. Now on Sam's turn, he decides to try to resolve a Smothering Tithe. There are no responses, so it resolves, and the turn is then passed to Shelby, who does not pay for Smothering Tithe, but he will play a Field of Ruin as land for turn, and then drop a Salt Skidder, which as it turns out is very good with Ephara. The turn will then be passed to Logan, and on the beginning of his upkeep, Shelby will draw a card, and neither of them pay for Smothering Tithe. Logan will then shock in a Stomping Ground, and then tap for 3 to cast Minsc. When he enters the battlefield, he'll make a Boo token, and Shelby's Salt Skidder will exile. He'll also cast a Birds of Paradise, then move to combat, swinging Krenko at Sam. Krenko will get a counter, and Logan will make 2 goblins. He also decides to swing Boo and his Esper Sentinel at Sam, so Sam will take a total of 4 damage. With nothing to do on his post-combat main phase, Logan will just pass the turn to Ethan. Salt Skidder comes back on Logan's end step, and he'll draw a card on Ethan's upkeep. And neither of them pay to Smothering Tithe at the beginning of their turns. And the first thing Ethan does is fetch for a Volcanic Island to make another rock. He'll then tap for 4 mana to cast Sakashima and copy Toggo. He can still copy Toggo even though it has Shroud because Sakashima's ability technically does not target. And when he enters, Salt Skidder will get exiled, and then Ethan will move the Greaves over to Sakashima. After this, he'll play a Fabled Passage and make 2 rocks. He'll then pass the turn to Sam, and Salt Skidder will come back on his end step. Shelby will draw yet another card off of Ephara, and won't pay for Smothering Tithe. Now in his main phase, Sam will cast his commander, Galea. When she enters, Salt Skidder gets exiled. He then casts an Open the Armory and does not pay for Esper Sentinel. He'll find a Swiftfoot Boots to his hand. He'll then cast said Swiftfoot Boots, which attach themselves to Galea when it enters. He'll then move to combat and swing for 4 at Shelby, who can't block. But before damage, Sam will flash in a Colossus Hammer, which will change that 4 commander to 14. Sam will then pass the turn, and Salt Skitter will come back. He'll draw 2 cards at the beginning of his turn, and not pay for either of them. He'll then play a Reliquary Tower as land for turn, then tap for 6 to cast a Neverflowing Chalice kicked 3 times. And Logan will draw a card off Esper Sentinel. And Sam will make a treasure. He'll then tap the Chalice to cast a Crystal Shard. The turn is then passed to Logan. And the Smothering Tithe is once again not paid for. Now in his main phase, Logan casts a Dryad of the Elysian Grove. He plays a Windswept Heath and a Spectator Seeding as his 2 lands for turn. He'll then cast an Occam Adversary, which will exile Salt Skitter, and then cast a Spike Shot Elder. After this, he'll move to combat and swing Krenko at Shelby, getting another counter and 3 more goblins. Logan will then pass the turn, and Salt Skitter will come back. Ethan will also fetch with his Fabled Passage for an island, making 2 more rocks. And at the beginning of his turn, when he and Shelby both draw, Sam will make 2 more treasure tokens. Now in his main phase, Ethan will play a mountain as land for turn, getting 2 rocks. He'll then tap for 4 and cast a Galazeth Prismari, which makes a treasure token when it ETBs. Salt Skitter will also get exiled. Ethan now has a lot of potential mana for instants and sorceries, but he decides to not continue any further and just passes the turn. Salt Skitter should come back on end step, and Shelby will remember this halfway through his turn. Sam will start his turn off by paying 4 into Soothsaying to look at the top 4 and reorder them in any order he wants. He'll then cast a Pure Steel Paladin, and then immediately cast an Explorer Scope off the top of his library, and he'll have it attached to Galea. And it's at this point Shelby realizes he forgot to return Salt Skitter. The board doesn't mind letting the action happen and then drawing the card he should have off Ephara. Sam will also get another treasure token off this, and then Shelby will re-exile Salt Skitter for when Pure Steel Paladin entered. Moving on, Sam will cast an Eternal Witness to get back Open the Armory. He'll then recast Open the Armory to find a Bare Umbra to his hand. After this, he moves to combat and swings for 14 Commander at Ethan. Unfortunately, Galea does not have Trample yet, so Ethan will happily chump block it with his Realm Right. Explorer's Scope will also trigger, and Sam will put in a Plains to the battlefield. He then plays a tapped Hollowed Fountain as his actual land drop for turn, and then passes the turn to Shelby. And Salt Skitter will return on end step. Shelby will draw 2 cards at the beginning of his turn, and Sam will make 2 treasure tokens. Shelby will then cast a Soul Ring with 2 mana floating, and then tap it to float a total of 4. Unfortunately, Logan misses his Esper Sentinel trigger. He'll then cast an Archaeomancer's Map, and then search his library for 2 basic plains to his hand. Then with the last 2 colorless, he'll cast a Mind Stone. He'll then shock in a Hollowed Fountain, and then just pass the turn. Poor guy is finding all the mana. Logan will stop him on his end step, and cast a Chord of Calling X is equal to 9. He's not really sure what he's looking for, but he'd made it as big as possible just in case. And ultimately, he decides to go with an Oran Frostfang. Not bad. And when it enters, it'll exile Salt Skitter. Now in his turn, Logan will not pay for Smothering Tithe. He'll then play a Scavenger Ground and a Spire Guard in his lands for turn, and when he does, Shelby will put in 2 basic plains thanks to Archaeomancer's Map. After this, Logan will activate Minx's ability to pump Krenko up to be a 9/9, but Shelby decides to respond and cast Sublime Epiphany. He'll start by countering Minx's ability to pump Krenko up. He then bounces Krenko to his hand, and finally he'll also choose to draw a card. He also pays for Esper Sentinel and Smothering Tithe. Logan will then move to combat and start declaring attackers. He'll start by swinging 5 goblins and Boo at Sam, and then everything else except the Giver of Runes at Shelby. Sam will block Boo with his Eternal Witness and then just take 5 damage. Shelby can't block, so he'll take 11. 3 of which is Commander. Then, once everything connects, Logan will draw 11 cards off Oran Frostfang, and then an extra 1 off the Occam Adversary. And seeing as he's tapped out, Logan can't pay for any of those Smothering Tithe triggers, so Sam will also make 12 treasures. Logan will then attempt to move to cleanup, but Ethan will stop him on his end step and cast a Whir of Invention, X is equal to 8. Just like Logan, he doesn't know what he's going to get, but he ultimately decides on a Clock of Omens. Shelby also remembers that Salt Skitter comes back. And Logan has a lot of cards to discard, so I'm just going to let him say them for you.
Okay, discarding Snowcover Forest, Collector, Athosworn Canonist, Kitchen Sphinx, Wrath of God, Krenko, Prophetic Flame Speaker, Land of War Elves, Chaos Warp, Smothering Tithe.
That is a lot of very good stuff, so the table's a little worried about what he still has in hand. Now on Ethan's turn, he and Shelby will both draw at the beginning of the turn, and they don't pay for Smothering Tithe. Now in his main phase, Ethan will cast a Psymaster Thopterist, and Salt Skitter will get exiled. Ethan will then cast a Trinket Mage after that, and he finds a Mana Vault with its ETB ability. He'll then tap 2 rocks to untap his Mox Opal using Clock of Omens. He'll then use that Mox Opal to cast Mana Vault, and Logan unfortunately misses another Esper Sentinel trigger, and Ethan also gets a Thopter token when he casts an artifact spell. Ethan will then untap Mox Opal again, and then retap it and Mana Vault to activate Psy, sacrificing 2 rocks to draw a card. He'll have 2 colorless mana floating. He'll then use Clock of Omens again to untap Mana Vault, and then retap it to have a total of 5 colorless mana floating. Then, thanks to Galazeth Prismari, Ethan will tap 4 more artifacts for red mana and cast Indomitable Creativity X is equal to 6 to destroy all of his rocks. Nobody has any responses, so Ethan will destroy all 6 of his rocks, and then start flipping cards off the top of his library till he hits 6 artifacts and or creatures. His first hit is Idol of Oblivion, then a KCI, Is It Signet, Reckless Fireweaver, Cursed Mirror, and finally a Goblin Welder. Not too shabby. These will all get put onto the battlefield. And when everything comes in, Ethan will copy Trinket Mage with his mirror, and then Reckless Fireweaver will deal 4 damage to everyone. And then with his copy of Trinket Mage, he'll find a Soul Ring. Now that all that's resolved, he'll play a Snow-Covered Island and get 2 rocks. When they enter, Fireweaver will deal 2 damage to all of his opponents. He'll then cast his Soul Ring and miss a Fireweaver trigger. When he casts a Soul Ring, Sai will make a Thopter, and he won't miss the damage this time. He'll then activate Idol of Oblivion to draw a card, and Sam will make a treasure. He'll then sacrifice the Idol to KCI to make 2 colorless mana. He'll then move his Greaves over to his Goblin Welder and activate it, sacrificing a Thopter to get back the Idol of Oblivion. When it enters, everyone takes 1. He'll then tap it again to draw another card. After this, he taps Soul Ring to get a total of 4 floating colorless mana. He'll then filter it into Is It with his Signet, then pay 2, sack 2 rocks, and draw a card with Sai's ability. He'll then sack a treasure for a blue, then activate Sai again by sacrificing a Thopter and his Is It Signet to draw 1 last card. Also, he didn't pay for any Smothering Tithe triggers during all of that. He'll then move his Greaves back over to Sakashima. And then finally, he'll move to combat, swing his Trinket Mirror at Shelby to kill him, and then pass the turn to Sam. Sam will stop him on his end step though, and flash in Bear Umbra onto his commander. He'll then sacrifice 6 treasures to rearrange the top 6 of his library with Soothsaying. Now in his turn, Sam will cast a Ristic Study to start off, and he'll pay for Esper Sentinel. He'll then cast a Rancor off the top of his library, and unfortunately there wasn't anything else in those top 6 cards, so he casts a Farseek to find a Plains and get a Shuffle. Still with nothing else on the top of his deck, he cracks 6 more treasures to look at the top 6 again. He puts them back in the order he wants, then moves to combat, and swings for 18 Commander at Logan. Logan, not wanting to take any chances, blocks 2 of that damage with Giver of Runes. They move to damage, and Logan will take 16 Commander. Sam also gets to untap all of his lands thanks to Bear Umbra, but he decides to not do anything else this turn, and passes to Logan. And Smothering Tithe will not be paid on his draw step. And Logan will play a Taiga and Sunpetal Grove as his 2 lands for turn. He then casts an Eternal Witness to get Court of Calling back to his hand. He does not pay the 1. He then casts Temur Sabertooth, not paying the 1, and everybody suddenly realizes what's going on. Logan will tap 5 creatures to convoke out a Court of Calling X is equal to 2. Ethan will respond by attempting to Pongify Temur Sabertooth. Logan will respond by bouncing back his Eternal Witness using Temur Sabertooth's ability, giving it indestructible. Unfortunately, this all happened pretty quick, so Sam does miss 2 Ristic Study triggers, and Logan misses a Sentinel trigger. With Cord still on the stack, Sam decides to flash in Darksteel Mutation on the Temur Sabertooth, and he will pay for Esper Sentinel. Darksteel Mutation resolves, and Logan goes to find a Dockside Extortionist. Sam considers sacrificing all of his treasures, and Ethan considers sacrificing all of his artifacts to KCI, but Logan says he has a way to destroy the Darksteel Mutation and continue his loop anyway, so it really doesn't matter. Sam still decides to respond though, and he'll cast a Wild Growth from the top of his library. He'll then sacrifice the last 6 of his treasures and Soothsaying for 6. This is all in response to the ETB trigger, so when it resolves, Logan will make 20 treasure tokens. He'll then sacrifice 4 treasures to Beast Within the Darksteel Mutation, paying for Ristic Study. He then shows everybody the loop. He can pay 2 mana to Temur Sabertooth to bounce Dockside back to his hand, and then recast Dockside to make 20 more treasure tokens. Even if Ethan decided to sack all of his artifacts, he'd still be making 11 each time. And he's got more than enough mana to pay for all the Ristic Study triggers. And so, Logan decides to make treasure tokens equal to the US national debt, which as of today is 23.3 trillion. He then sacrifices 10 trillion of them to make Spikeshot Elder a 10 trillion, and then casts Chandra's Ignition targeting Spikeshot Elder. There are no responses at the table, and Ethan and Sam are absolutely blasted into oblivion. Today's winner is Logan and Minsc the Beloved Ranger. Hey guys, welcome to the end of the video. What did you think? I really liked that explosive end. If you did enjoy it, let us know by leaving a like and subscribing and letting us know what you thought in the comments. While you're down there, be sure to check out the deck lists and our social media pages. The links will be in the description. Thank you so much again for watching everyone, and have a smooth day.